Welcome back to Racing Rundown here on YouTube. I'm Eric DeCoster. In this preview, we will be taking a look at the $1.25 million Travers Stakes Grade 1, the Midsummer Derby. You know about it. It's one of the features every year. Essentially the fourth leg of the Triple Crown is how I like to view it, with the quality it brings every single edition. Horses from the Triple Crown, some of those late bloomers who weren't quite able to make the big three races. It just brings together the best of the best, really. It's always a deep group, and no different this year. You have the top three finishers from the Kentucky Derby, all showing up first time since 2016. That's happened in a non-Triple Crown race. And hey, back in 2016, that Pennsylvania Derby where Nyquist, Exaggerator, Gunrunner all showed up, it was won by one of those up-and-comers. Could be the case this year. So you have all of those horses. You have the Haskell winner in Cyberknife. Here you have some regional show rubbers, really one regional newcomer in Ain't Life Grand, and you have some horses that prepped well at Saratoga as well, and the Preakness winner, early voting. So just deep bunch here, and we'll go through all of them, starting with the Haskell winner. That was Cyberknife, very impressive horse. He's won 4 of his last 5 starts, 4 of his 6 runs this year. He's just been good. He has really turned a corner. It took him a while to find his best stride, but since he has been a very nice horse to watch, especially that Haskell win. Holding off Taba, who is a very talented horse in his own right. Jack Christopher probably didn't like the distance, but nevertheless, to beat a horse of that quality, it was a deserved Grade 1 win. And it was on the heels of a race in the Matt win that he won, but as a 1-2 favorite, winning by a nose, didn't exactly blow anybody away. So the fact he was able to bounce back the way he did in the Haskell, put on that huge performance, run his best career numbers by all metrics, very impressive. And I think you can even draw a line through that Derby. He was very close to the pace in that spot. He was 5th and 6th early on, and it was a race where you could not be in the first 10 really without putting yourself at a huge disadvantage. And he ran like it. He ran to 18th out of 20, but the race just purely didn't set up for him. He's a much better horse than that. I could see him taking another step forward here. I don't think he's a winner. I think he's a horse you can trust on to run well, though, because I think, at least to me, and I think to many others, there was a perception maybe he's just not all that. You look at the Haskell. He was a horse who'd won 3 of his last 4 races, including a Grade 1, and he still went off at almost 8-1 in the Haskell, and then he wins. And with the likes of Epicenter and Zandon, as well as Artorias, who I think will take a fair share of money, I think it's fair to think Cyberknife, even though he's 7-2 morning line, that's, I think, the lowest he goes. I think he can float from there and still be overlooked in that sense, but I think he's worth a lot of value, especially if your favorite Epicenter especially doesn't show up on the day. The 2 is Rich Strike, your Kentucky Derby winner. Last time out was 6 out of 8 in the Belmont, just flat in there, plain and simple. Never looked comfortable. They said he didn't really like being outside of horses, which kind of makes sense given his best runs have come rallying up the inside of the track. We saw it happen in the Derby. I think it's fair to not have much hope in him to maybe win this race. For one, there's not a lot of pace on paper. We'll dive into that as this preview goes on. But also just the talent. He's been beaten by lesser horses before. He was really well beaten in the Belmont by Mo Donegal and Nest, who, sure, they don't show up in here, but it's also fair to say that those horses are probably of the quality of the top level in this race. They're all very similar on talent. So it's hard to envision a way in which he can win, because his best career win and his only win against real quality racehorses came when the race set up perfectly for him, which that's how it looked on paper. And unless there's some weird meltdown that I don't expect seeing and no one else expects seeing, just don't see how he can win. Maybe he'll be picking up some pieces late, but I don't think it'll be enough to really benefit anybody. The 3's Ain't Life Grand, the Iowa bred. Of course, I'm partial to him, being an Iowa bred myself. This colt who has done a lot of good work in his last 2 starts. Very easy to look over his first 2 runs of the year. The Bachelor was too short for him off a layoff. The Prairie Mile was too short for him, I think, even going 2 turns, and also the race didn't set up well for him. The Iowa Derby, picture perfect, and then the Iowa Stallion Stakes last time out, that was basically a paid workout. And now he gets to 1.25 miles, a distance he's certain to love with this pedigree, by not this time out of a Medagliadoro mare. He's a big rangy type who just wants to go further, and it's going to benefit him. I want him to run well. I think I wouldn't be surprised if he maybe hit the board, but he does need to get better, because this is a tough bunch of runners. He's a lot of talent. He's just so unexposed, and that's very fair to question his true ability until he races against the graded stakes level, which he's never done. So, I wouldn't question anybody for taking a flyer on him. Not at all. To win, to hit the board, makes a lot of sense. Using on your tickets, I don't think that's crazy at all. Just for me, I think you got to go with the safer route, but I will definitely be rooting him on. The 4 is Gilded Age for Bill Mott. Deep closer here as well. He's one who's also going to be put at a huge disadvantage from a race setup perspective. A horse who, since coming back from Dubai, where he was 13th as a pretty well-backed type in the UAE Derby, at least, I wouldn't say he's more of a wise guy type than a well-backed. He was not too well bet, but there were plenty of people out there who thought he had a chance to run well, including me. He ran 13th that day, but his comebacks, the allowance at Churchill, with a huge late kick to win there, was impressive, albeit that was into a somewhat quick pace, very quick pace, in fact. But the Curlin run was good. Second behind Artorias, who sat the trip there, the perfect trip, while Gilded Age had to make up a lot of ground. He came rallying nicely, into a slow pace, no less. But that's just the thing. I could see him kind of like Rich Strike, picking up some pieces late in the race, but can I really expect you to win when you've kind of shown this pattern of needing a strong pace to close into? It's just not realistically going to happen here. So once again, one you could maybe throw into some lower spots, but not one I think could be used in the win category at all. The 5 is Artorias, a horse I've already mentioned a couple times. We'll get to him now. He won 2 in a row after running a really strong race on debut, where he was very green at Keeneland, waited a month and a half or so to run at Belmont, where he finished up very nicely, going a mile, and then stretching out to 2 turns, showed an even new dimension, winning the Curlin Stakes, one of the, almost like the Jim Dandy consolation there. It's an easier spot for sure, and he took full advantage of it, winning by almost 5, but he definitely fits in this bunch with how he has ran his last 2 races, and even on debut, but his last 2 races we've really gotten to see what he's made of. For Chad Brown, one of 3 that he runs in here. Ortiz returns to ride here. Just a horse who's going to relish getting out to the 1.25 miles. He's already done well at a mile and a 1.125 miles, but he's going to get better going this distance, and obviously it's hard to not draw comparisons to his dad, Arrogate, with this late development into the Travers. We know Arrogate broke his maiden, and that one thing led to another, and he all of a sudden was in the Travers, and he wasn't too well backed, and then he wins it by double digits. I don't think Artorias does that, but I sort of think he runs a big race. Now, I am hesitant to pick a horse like this just because of the other quality in here, but if this was any other Travers, for one, he might even be favored. And when I say any other Travers, I mean that's how it would be viewed in the grand scheme of things. The Travers is really never any other race, but it has its off years, and if this was one of those off years, you'd certainly see Artorias being favored, and he'll be well backed, probably the 3rd or 4th choice in the betting, no worse than 6-1, I think. But point being, he's got a chance to be competitive in here. I just don't know if he can beat these horses that have been tried and true, knocking in the biggest races in the country month in and month out. And that takes us into Epicenter, who is one of those horses. He'll be making his 7th start of the year. He's never been worse than 2nd in all these runs. He's a horse who, listen, he probably should have won the Kentucky Derby, and he probably should have won the Preakness. Just things didn't work out his way. But he has proven in his last 5 starts to be the best 3-year-old in the country on talent. But now he has to back it up. He's still not a Grade 1 winner. Cyberknife has 2, for instance. And his win in the Jim Dandy really kind of assured me that he was the best horse around in this division, having beaten Zandon and beating early voting, the one horse that kind of stuck it to him in the Preakness, but we knew he could be better than Zandon, and he kind of doubled down on that a 3rd time. So now it's just beat these other guys. You got to beat Rich Strike, of course. You got to beat Artorias, and you finished in front of Cyberknife once. Can you do it on a more even playing field where you're sitting farther back than Cyberknife? All questions that need to be answered by Epicenter, but based off his consistency and his talent, there's no reason to think he can't do it. He certainly is the best horse in the race. There's a reason he's going to be the favorite, but we also know he can have his off days. Listen, his loss in Lecomte really made no sense. The Derby, it made sense because last run was going to be very beneficial in that spot, and he happened to get picked off. And then in the Preakness, it was just not a great ride, and that can be the separator in this spot too. It's no different than it's an 8-horse field instead of a 9, but it has shown that Epicenter can maybe find some trouble in a 9-horse field. Why can't it be an 8-horse field as well? But those aren't things I can predict on paper. It seems like he can set a really good stalking trip outside. I don't think he'll be as far back as he was in the Preakness and the Jim Dandy. If he is, it's really no chance he wins, I think, if he's in the back half of the field. He has to be in that top 4. It doesn't have to be on the lead. Let early voting go. But you need to be 2nd, 3rd, or 4th early on. Otherwise, I think you're putting yourself at a huge disadvantage because a lot of these horses can't change their running style. They are just that naturally slow, and that's your Gilded Ages and your Rich Strikes. Your Ain't Life Grand kind of falls into that category. And then you have the Artoriases and the Cyberknives who they can be tactical and they can be in the game, but that is not when they run their best races. So for Epicenter, you know you can win. You can make your own trip. Joel Rosario needs to be a little aggressive here and just make sure his horse is in that first or second flight as they make their way to the first turn. Otherwise, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. Because the 7, who we'll move on to early voting, very well could be Lone Speed in here. In fact, he's the only horse that wants to be in front. He will be in front as long as he gets out of the gate fine. The Preakness winner, we saw him take full advantage of it there. He's had a perfect trip off of Longshot Armagnac and took over when it was needed, but he's ran some really big races on the front end. The Withers was a huge wire-to-wire score where he just blitzed them in the Wood Memorial. He nearly beat the Belmont winner in Mo Donegal, getting away with nice splits, and I could easily see him doing it again. The Jim Dandy wasn't great. I can't explain it. I think it's fair to say Epicenter and Zandon. Epicenter definitely more talented than early voting. Zandon probably pretty close, but not that much. Not as bad as it really looked. I think early voting's a much better horse than that. So I think if he can break and run back to the Preakness, I think he's a guaranteed board hitter in here. There's no way with how the race sets up for him, things should go the other way, because he has the talent to hang with this bunch. I mean, it's maybe a little deeper than the Preakness, but all things considered, he beat probably the best 3-year-old in the country, and he beat Mo Donegal, who's very close to that, and unfortunately he's not in this race, but point being, he can run with this level, and I think people are going to overanalyze the Jim Dandy performance and how negative it was and try to use that to justify going against him in here. But listen, if a horse like this is going to be 8-1 like the morning line suggests, with the tactical advantage he has, I think it'd be ridiculous not to use him in some way, or maybe just say this is the winner, because I think that he's shown so much before that, and I don't think he'd be in this race if Chad Brown didn't think he could run back to the Preakness or the Wood or the Withers. So early voting, I think he has a huge chance, and if he's going to be in that high single price odds range, there is no reason to look past him. The 8 is Zandon, final horse, last of 3 for Chad Brown in here. A colt who won the Bluegrass nice, but he's kind of picking up this theme of chasing the better horses around. He's good in his own right, no doubt, but he is just kind of showing at the graded stakes level to be second or third best. And his Bluegrass one was great. It's hard not to love a performance like the one he put on there, but it's not easy being better than a Smile Happy and Emmanuel, but if you want to be considered this upper echelon of the 3-year-old division, you should be beating those horses handily, which he did. But now you can't beat Epicenter. Horse you've lost to 3 times now, or at least finished behind, plus the loss to Mo Donegal in the Remsen, which, listen, you threw it down with him pretty well, but I think, to me at least, Mo Donegal was the better horse on the day. And I think that just kind of shows what you are. I think the big thing is the last 2 races, where he wasn't able to get past Epicenter down the stretch despite getting the better trip of the 2. And the Jim Dandy, he's had an excellent stalking trip just off of his stablemate, who he let do the dirtiest work. And he let Epicenter run right by him. I mean, this is, the not getting past a horse like in the Derby, where he was making that second run past Epicenter, or trying to at least. That's one thing. That might be, he just kind of flamed out late. But that's okay. That's what happens. But in the Jim Dandy, when it happens to you the other way, where you get first run and you get past, that to me is just telling that Epicenter is the better of the two. So I think Zandon, as good as he is, I just don't see how he is better than Epicenter, and there's nothing from a tactical perspective that suggests he could take it one step further. So I think as I get into my picks for this race, I think for one, Chad Brown's got 3 in here. I think early voting is the one you have to go with. I know he's going to be the longest price, at least by morning line indications. That's now what I would put together if I put together the morning line, but if that's really what the odds will reflect when post time comes, I think early voting, with the tactical advantage he's going to have, the figures he's put together at multiple points in his career, certainly the strongest of those 3 runners. But I think your winner is Epicenter. He can make his own trip as long as he sits a correct trip, doesn't find trouble in this field, which, like I said, you wouldn't think he could, but we saw it in the Preakness. He can find trouble in an 8 or 9 horse field. As long as he can avoid that, he should be a clear winner. That being said, I think early voting puts up a fight. I think he runs a big race. I think if you're going to try to find a bigger price, and that would really just kind of be the 2 through 4 in here, Rich Strike, 8 Life Grand, and Gilded Age, I think 8 Life Grand would be kind of the most wild type on in terms of his turn of foot, stronger than anybody, especially in a race that doesn't have a good pace set up for him. He'd be the one I'd expect to close best into a slow pace. But Epicenter on top. We'll go early voting underneath with 8 Life Grand. That'd go 6, 7, 3, but it's going to be a fun race. Really excited. I also think Cyberknife's got a chance. I usually overlook him. I'm going to do it again here, but if he wins, he's very well going to be your 3-year-old champion. So a lot on the line, and what's going to be a great Travers. Can't wait. Hope everybody enjoys. Make sure to join us on Friday for a live stream, because obviously my co-host Jack was not here to partake of this as he's still on vacation, but he'll be back Friday. He's going to do a live show. He's going to walk you through the card. It's going to be great. Please make sure to join for that. And also just join us for our regular Racing Rundown episode. It's going to be action-packed. Going to do some extra things in there I'm sure you all like. So tune in there. Appreciate you joining us. Good luck. We'll see you next time here on Racing Rundown.